Ladies, let me tell you something. The way a high-value woman speaks to a man is not louder. It is not longer. It is not more convincing. It is calmer, shorter, and more certain than anything he has ever heard in his life. And once you hear it broken down the way I'm about to break it down for you, you will never open your mouth the same way again. So sit down, get comfortable, because tonight we are going to talk about the words that change everything. Have you ever sat there, phone in your hand, typing a paragraph? Not a sentence, baby. A paragraph. Explaining how you feel. Explaining why you feel it. Explaining why he should care that you feel it, and then deleting half of it because you don't want to sound like you're doing too much. And then adding it back because, shoot, you are doing too much and somebody ought to know. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Here's the brutal truth. That paragraph was never going to change him. Not the first one, not the 12th one, not the one you wrote at 1:30 in the morning with tears drying on your cheeks. Because high-value women discovered something a long time ago, and it is this. A man does not respond to the length of your explanation. He responds to the weight of your certainty. And certainty does not need a paragraph. Certainty needs a sentence. Now hear me on this. This is not a video about playing games. This is not a video about manipulation, about tricks, about being cold and fake and acting like you don't care when your whole chest is on fire. No, sister. This is about something much deeper than that. This is about the way a woman who knows her worth sounds when she opens her mouth, and why that sound makes a man sit up straight in his spirit. Because let me tell you something that nobody told you growing up. Men do not fall in love with your looks first. They do not fall in love with your cooking first. They do not even fall in love with your body first, no matter what the world tries to sell you. Men fall in love with the way a woman makes them feel about themselves. And the fastest way a woman makes a man feel anything is through her voice, through her words, through the way she says what she says, and even more important, through what she refuses to say. I've watched this for decades. I've sat across from thousands of women, beautiful women, brilliant women, women with degrees, with businesses, with babies they raised by themselves, with faith that could move mountains. And you know what separated the women who were cherished from the women who were dragged through the mud? It wasn't beauty. It wasn't money. It wasn't even character. In some cases, it was speech. It was the way they talked to a man when it counted. The woman who was dragged, she talked too much at the wrong moments and said nothing at the right ones. She explained when she should have been quiet. She was quiet when she should have spoken once, clearly, and meant it. She negotiated her worth like it was a price at a flea market. And the man heard every bit of that negotiation, and he priced her accordingly. The woman who was cherished, baby, she spoke like her words cost something, because to her, they did. She didn't throw them around hoping one would land. She placed them, like a woman placing good china on a table, carefully, on purpose, knowing the value of what was in her hand. And that's what we're building tonight. Word by word, truth by truth. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how high value women speak to men, why it works on a psychological level he doesn't even understand about himself, what specific shifts you can make starting tonight, and what mistakes will undo everything if you're not careful. That's the promise. And I keep my promises. Now let's get into it, because the first thing you have to understand is why you talk the way you talk right now. And I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying that to wake you up. See, most women were not taught how to speak with power. Most women were taught how to speak with apology. Think about it. From the time you were a little girl, what did the world reward you for? Being sweet, being agreeable, being easy. Little girls who said exactly what they thought were called bossy. Little girls who set a boundary were called rude. Little girls who took up space with their voice were told to use their inside voice. Baby, even when the inside was the only place their voice was ever allowed to live. So you grew up and you carried that training right into your relationships like luggage you didn't pack. And it shows up in 100 little ways. It shows up when you say, I'm sorry, but before you state a need. I'm sorry, but I don't like when you disappear for 2 days. Listen to that. You're apologizing for having a nervous system. It shows up when you say, does that make sense? After every third sentence, like your feelings need a permission slip to exist. It shows up when you soften every truth with a cushion of giggles and lull, and no worries if not, until the truth is buried so deep in pillows that nobody can find it, including you. And here's what's happening inside his mind while all of that is going on. Because this is the part they don't teach you. Men are not analyzing your paragraphs the way you think they are. A man is not sitting there reading your 4-screen text message thinking, wow, she makes an excellent point in paragraph 3. No. A man is reading the tone underneath your words. He is scanning for one thing and one thing only. Does she believe what she's saying, or is she hoping I'll believe it for her? That is the entire game, sister. That is the whole thing. When a woman speaks from hope instead of certainty, a man can smell it, not consciously. He can't write you an essay about it. But somewhere in the back of his brain, a little meter moves. And that meter says, she'll stay anyway. She'll accept this anyway. She's upset, but she's not going anywhere. And the moment that meter moves, his behavior adjusts to the new information. Not because he's evil, because he's human. Every human being on this planet, man or woman, adjusts their effort to match what they believe is required. You do it at your job. He does it in your relationship. Let me tell you about a woman I know. Let's call her Maya. Maya was sharp, successful, the kind of woman who could run a meeting with 40 people and have every single one of them eating out of her hand by lunch. But at home, Maya turned into a courtroom attorney with no client. Her man would come home late, no call, no text, smelling like somewhere he hadn't told her about. And Maya would be waiting up, and she would deliver the most beautiful, well-structured, emotionally articulate speeches you have ever heard. She had exhibits. She had precedents. She cited things he said in March. And he would sit on the couch, nod at the right moments, say, you're right, baby, I'ma do better, and then do the exact same thing 11 days later. You know why? Because Maya's speeches had one fatal flaw, and it wasn't the content. The content was flawless. The flaw was that she was still sitting there delivering them. Every speech said, this is unacceptable, but her presence said, but I'm accepting it. And a man always believes the presence over the speech. Always. The day everything changed for Maya was not the day she gave a better speech. It was the day she stopped giving speeches at all. He came home late one night and she was calm, not cold, calm. She looked at him and said one sentence. She said, this doesn't work for me. That's it. No exhibits, no precedents, no tears. And then she went to bed. And that man lay awake the whole night because for the first time in 2 years, he could not locate the bottom of her patience. He had always known exactly where it was. It was wherever he pushed it to. And now it was gone. And the absence of it was louder than every speech she had ever given. That's the first lesson. And I need you to write it on your heart. High-value women do not speak more. They speak with more weight. There is a difference, and the difference is everything. Now, let's break down what's really happening inside his mind when you over-explain, because I want you to see the machinery. When you explain a feeling 3 different ways, you think you're being clear. He experiences it as negotiation. When you say, I just feel like maybe sometimes it would be nice if, you think you're being gentle. He hears a suggestion he can file under optional. When you ask, are you mad at me? For the 3rd time in a week, you think you're seeking closeness. He hears that his moods run the house. Everything you say teaches him how to treat you, not just the big statements, the small ones, especially the small ones. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but if I don't explain myself, he'll misunderstand me. Baby, listen to me carefully. A man who wants to understand you will understand a sentence. A man who doesn't want to understand you will misunderstand a novel. The length was never the problem. So here is the diagnosis. Plain and simple. You learn to speak to men from a place of anxiety. Anxiety talks a lot. Anxiety over-prepares. Anxiety sends the follow-up text, then the follow-up to the follow-up, then the sorry. My phone is acting weird. Text that we both know is not about the phone. Anxiety performs. And performance, no matter how beautiful, always reads as performance. High-value speech comes from the opposite place. It comes from rest. Not resting from life, resting in yourself. The settled, unshakable knowledge that if he leaves, you will grieve and you will heal and you will still be whole. So there is nothing to perform for. That woman sounds different. She has always sounded different. Men have been writing songs about that woman for 100 years, and they can't even tell you why. So now let's get into the deep mechanism. Let's talk about exactly what that woman sounds like, piece by piece, because there are specific patterns here. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The first pattern is this. High-value women state. They don't ask permission. Watch the difference. The anxious version says, do you think maybe we could spend some time together this weekend? No pressure. I know you're busy. The high-value version says, I want to see you this weekend. What day works? Same desire. Completely different weight. The first one is a child asking for a later bedtime. The second one is a woman extending an invitation. And invitations can be declined, and she will survive the decline. And he knows it. See, here's what men are wired to do. They are wired to track confidence the way your phone tracks a signal. Constantly, automatically, in the background. And confidence in speech has a shape. It has a subject, a verb, and a period at the end. I don't accept being spoken to that way. Period. Not, I don't really love being spoken to that way, and I know you didn't mean it, and maybe I'm being sensitive, but the moment you add the cushion, you deflate the message. High-value women learn to say the sentence and then do the hardest thing in the world. Stop talking. Because here's the secret about silence that nobody wants to tell you. Silence is not passive. Silence is a spotlight. When you say your piece and then go quiet, the silence points at him. It says, the next move is yours, and I'm comfortable letting you make it. Most women cannot hold that silence for 5 seconds. They say something powerful and then immediately start backpedaling, filling the space, softening the edges, asking, you know what I mean? And every word of filler takes the spotlight off him and points it back at her doubt. Let me tell you about Rachel. Rachel had been dating a man for 8 months, and the relationship was living in that gray zone where he acted like a boyfriend when it was convenient and a stranger when it wasn't. Rachel used to handle it with questions. What are we? Where is this going? Do you see a future with me? And every question gave him the same gift, the knowledge that she was invested in an answer he hadn't earned yet. One evening, they were at dinner, and he made one of those little jokes men make when they want the benefits without the title. Something like, see, this is why we don't need labels. This right here is perfect. And old Rachel would have laughed and died inside. New Rachel put her fork down, looked at him, and said, I'm not available for perfect with no future. I like you, but I build toward things. And if that's not what this is, that's fine. We'll just be two people who had some nice dinners. And then she picked her fork back up and asked him how his mother's surgery went. Do you understand what happened in that moment? She didn't ask him what they were. She told him what she was. She handed him the remote to her heart and said, there's one channel on this thing, and it's called forward. You can watch it or you can leave the room. She told me he got quiet for about 30 seconds. And then he said, I don't want to be two people who had nice dinners. They got married 14 months later, not because she tricked him, because she finally spoke his language, and his language is wait. The second pattern, high-value women use their voice to describe reality, not to manage his emotions. Now hear me on this, because this is where so many good women get tangled. You learn somewhere that if you say the hard thing, he might get upset, he might pull away, he might decide you're difficult. So you started editing the truth for his comfort. You started saying, it's fine when it was on fire. You started swallowing the sentence that would have set you free because you were afraid of the face he would make. Baby, a high-value woman does not manage a grown man's emotions with her silence. That is his job. Her job is to speak what is true with grace and let the chips fall. I felt disrespected tonight, not screamed, not weaponized, just stated like the weather. And here's what happens in his mind when you do that. It's uncomfortable for him, yes, but discomfort from a calm woman registers completely differently than comfort from a nervous one. A calm woman stating a hard truth triggers something ancient in a man. It triggers respect, because every man knows deep down that a woman who can say the uncomfortable thing calmly is a woman who can leave calmly. And a woman who can leave calmly is a woman he must show up for. The third pattern, and this one is spicy, so sit down. High-value women do not chase clarity from a man who benefits from her confusion. Read that again. There are men who keep things vague en priority, because vagueness is the loophole that lets him have you without having to choose you. And every time you go to him asking, so what are we doing here? You are asking the loophole to close itself. He is not going to close the loophole. The loophole is working perfectly for him. The high-value woman does not ask what they are. She watches what he does, decides what it means, and speaks from the decision. You know, I've noticed we're more like pen pals than partners. That's not the arrangement I'm looking for, so I'm going to step back. Notice what's missing from that sentence. A question mark. She's not asking him if her observation is correct. She's not asking him to fix it. She is announcing a conclusion her self-respect already reached. And you know what that does to a man who's been coasting? It short-circuits the whole system, because he had a script for the conversation where she asks and he dodges. He has no script for the conversations where she concludes. Let me tell you about Tasha. Tasha spent 3 years in a situationship with a man who called her his best friend, slept in her bed, met her mother, and flinched like he'd been tased every time the word relationship entered a room. And Tasha asked the question every few months, gently, reasonably, at exactly the right moment. And every time he gave her a beautiful speech about timing and wounds and not wanting to ruin what they had. Then one day, Tasha heard something like what you're hearing right now, and it rewired her. She realized she had been asking him a question she already had the answer to. The answer was no. It had been no for 3 years. He was just saying it in a tone that sounded like maybe. So she stopped asking. She called him on a Tuesday, calm as Sunday morning, and said, I finally understand what this is, and I want you to know I'm not angry. But I'm not available for it anymore. I wish you nothing but good things. He called her 11 times that week. He wrote her a letter. He showed up at her sister's cookout with a plan and a timeline. And Tasha, God bless her, had already grieved the thing while she was still in it. So she just smiled and said, I hope you mean that for the next woman, because you taught me exactly what I won't accept again. Now, I'm not telling you that story so you'll expect the same ending. Sometimes he chases, sometimes he doesn't. And the win is not the chase. The win is that Tasha speaks to herself differently now. The win is that she got 3 years of her voice back. The fourth pattern: high-value women compliment like queens, not like fans. Now, this surprises people. They think speaking with power means being cold or withholding. Absolutely not. A high-value woman is warm. She is generous. She will tell a man exactly what she admires about him. But watch how she does it. She says, the way you handled that situation with your brother, that took character. I respect that. Specific, grounded, tied to who he is, not to how badly she needs him. Compare that to, you're so amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're literally the best thing that ever happened to me. One of those statements makes a man stand taller. The other one makes him look around for the exit, because nobody wants to be the load-bearing wall in somebody else's life. Here's the psychology. A man wants to be chosen by a woman whose choosing means something. If you adore everything, your adoration means nothing. If you praise rarely and precisely, your praise becomes a currency. Men work for that currency. They will reorganize their whole character to earn another deposit. I've seen grown men, hard men who hadn't changed a habit since 1998, suddenly start acting brand new because one calm woman said, I love how you keep your word, and he wanted to hear it again. The fifth pattern, and this might be the most important one of the night. High-value women speak about their standards in the present tense, as facts of their life, not as threats. The anxious woman says, if you ever lie to me again, I'm gone. I swear it, this is the last time. She said it 9 times. He knows the 10th is coming. The high-value woman says once, I don't stay where I'm lied to, and then she lives it. No countdown, no warnings, no negotiations. And because there is no speech to argue with, there is nothing for him to fight. He can't argue with a woman's life. He can only decide whether he qualifies for it. You see the difference? Threats invite debate. Facts invite decision. And men, whatever else you want to say about them, respect a decision they have to make. I don't stay where I'm lied to. Puts a quiet question in his chest that follows him everywhere. Am I the kind of man she stays for? That question is worth more than every ultimatum ever delivered in the history of relationships. Because an ultimatum pressures him for a week. That question recruits him for a lifetime. And here's a bonus truth inside this pattern. High-value women don't announce standards they aren't enforcing. If you say, I don't accept being canceled on last minute, and then you accept it with a smile and a no worries, you haven't set a standard. You've told a story, and he's heard the story, and he knows it's fiction, and now your words have inflation. Every sentence buys a little less than the last one. Sister, protect the value of your currency. Say less. Mean all of it. Now, the sixth pattern, and this one is about the hardest moments. The blow-ups. The nights where the air in the house is thick enough to chew. High-value women fight differently. Not dirty, not loud, not with ancient history pulled up from 2019 like evidence bags. They fight clean and they fight short. Here's what it sounds like. I'm too upset to talk about this well right now. We're going to take an hour and then we're going to finish this conversation because it matters. Do you hear what's in that sentence? Self-control, self-respect, and commitment to the relationship, all in two breaths. She didn't storm out. She didn't perform her pain. She didn't say things designed to leave marks. She protected the relationship from her own worst moment. That is mastery. Because here's what's happening inside his mind during a fight. And most women never learn this. In a heated moment, a man is not processing your content. He's processing threat. His whole system is scanning. Am I safe? Am I respected? Am I about to be humiliated? When a woman fights loud and cutting, his system classifies her as danger, and everything she said gets filed under attack, even if every word of it was true. When a woman fights calm and clean, his system stays online long enough to actually hear her. You want to be heard in the hard moments? Turn the volume down and the clarity up. It is counterintuitive and it works every single time. Let me tell you about Denise. Denise grew up in a house where love was loud. People yelled and slammed and said terrible things and then made breakfast together the next morning like nothing happened. And nobody ever apologized. Ever. So Denise brought that whole inheritance into her marriage. And for the first 2 years, every disagreement was a 5-alarm fire. And her husband, who grew up in a house where nobody said anything at all, would shut down completely, go stone-faced, leave the room mid-sentence. And his silence would make her louder. And her loudness would make him quieter. And round they went. Two people who loved each other, speaking languages of war. What changed was one sentence Denise learned and practiced in the mirror like an actress. I'm angry and I love you. And both of those things are true right now. The first time she said it, mid-argument, her husband actually stopped walking, turned around. Because she had done something he'd never seen in a conflict. She had told the truth about her anger without making him the enemy of it. That sentence became the doorway they both walked through, and 5 years later, their friends think they never fight. They fight plenty. They just fight like two people on the same team, because Denise learned that the high-value voice is not the absence of emotion. It is emotion with a steering wheel. Now let me go deeper, because I want to talk about the moments between the big moments, the everyday speech, because that's where the real magic lives. High-value women narrate their own worth casually, in passing, without ceremony. They say things like, that's not really my style, when he suggests something beneath her standards, and they say it the way you'd comment on the weather. No lecture, just a fact about herself, filed into the record. Or when he tries a little joke at her expense in front of his friends, she doesn't explode and she doesn't shrink. She smiles and says, careful, with a little raise of the eyebrow, and keeps eating her dinner. And every man at that table feels it. The temperature changed 1 degree. The queen corrected the court without raising her voice. And her man, whether he admits it or not, just fell a little deeper. And here's another everyday pattern that will change your life if you let it. High-value women receive without deflecting. When he says, you look beautiful tonight, the anxious trained woman says, oh, stop, I look a mess. I didn't even have time to do my hair. She thinks she's being humble. What she's actually doing is rejecting his gift and training him to stop giving it. The high-value woman looks at him and says, thank you, I feel beautiful tonight. That's it. Receive the gift. Let it land. Because a man who gives and has it received will keep giving. A man who gives and has it deflected will eventually stop. And then you'll wonder where the romance went. It went where all unreceived gifts go, away. Same with help. When he offers to fix something, carry something, handle something, the high-value woman says, that would be wonderful, thank you. Even if she's perfectly capable of doing it herself. And I can hear some of you now, but I am capable. Of course you're capable. That's not the point. The point is that a man bonds through usefulness. When you let him contribute, you're not being weak. You're giving him a role in your life. And men protect the lives they have roles in. You can open your own door and let him open it. Both things can be true. Maturity is knowing which one builds the house. Let me tell you about Simone. Simone was the oldest of 5, raised her siblings while her mama worked doubles, became the kind of woman who could change a tire, file her own taxes, and negotiate a car deal in the same afternoon. And she brought all of that competence into her dating life like a resume. And she could not figure out why men kept fading after a few great months. One man finally told her the truth on his way out, and it stung. He said, you don't need anything from anybody. It felt like dating a country. You're fully sovereign. There's nowhere for a man to stand. Simone didn't become helpless. Hear me now. She became receivable. She started letting a man pick the restaurant without correcting his choice. She started saying, I'd love that, when he offered to plan a date instead of, you don't have to do that. She started letting silences be his to fill sometimes. And she told me the wildest part wasn't how men responded. It was how she felt. She said, for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't managing the whole experience. I was in it. That's what high-value speech actually is, underneath everything else. It's the sound of a woman who is in her life instead of managing it. Now, let's talk about texting, because I know you're waiting on this part. And yes, it deserves its own truth. The way high-value women text is the way they talk, just shorter. They do not live in the message thread. They do not conduct relationship business by paragraph at midnight. They match energy and then they subtract 1 degree. If he writes 3 lines, she writes 2. Not as a tactic, baby, as a lifestyle. Because her life is full, and full lives produce short text naturally. The problem was never that you double texted. The problem was that the double text was a leak from an empty afternoon. Fill the afternoon. The texts fix themselves. And when the conversation needs to be real, when something needs to be addressed, the high-value woman does not do it in writing. She says, I want to talk about something. Are you free tonight? Because she knows that tone is 90% of communication. And text has no tone, and important things deserve a voice. The anxious woman fights by text because text feels safer. The high-value woman talks because talk is stronger. And here's the spicy truth bomb for this section. Anything you are afraid to say out loud is exactly the thing keeping you stuck. The fear of saying it is the prison. Say it. Watch the walls come down. It's 11:47 p.m. Your phone lights up. Your heart jumps. It's him after 6 days of silence. And the message says, "You up now?" Two women live inside you in this moment. The first woman is already typing. She's got 3 drafts. She wants to say, "Wow, 6 days and this is what I get." Or worse, she wants to say, "Yes, yeah," like the 6 days never happened. The second woman, the high value one, looks at that message and feels almost nothing because "you up" after 6 days is not communication. It's a drive-by. It's a man tossing a pebble at your window to see if the light's still on. And she has a house rule. The light is not on for drive-bys. So she goes to sleep. And in the morning, if she responds at all, she responds like a woman with a full life. "Morning. I've got a busy day, but I hope you're well." No anger, no coldness, just altitude. And that altitude will teach him more than any lecture about respect ever could. Because here's what he learns. Her attention is not on standby. You don't summon it, you earn it. Now, I told you earlier I'd show you the power move, the shift that changes everything. Here it is. And it's going to sound too simple to be this powerful, but I'm telling you, it is the whole game. The power move is this. Start every important sentence with "what yes," not with "what you hope." The anxious voice starts from hope and begs reality to agree. The high value voice starts from reality and lets hope catch up. Practically, that means you replace the question, "Can we talk about us?" with the statement, "I want to talk about us tonight." You replace, "Would it be okay if you didn't do that?" with "That doesn't work for me." You replace, "Do you even care about this relationship?" with "I care about this relationship. And right now it's not being cared for." Do you feel the ground change under those sentences? The first version hands him your power and asks him to hand it back nicely. The second version keeps your power in your own hands, where it lived the whole time. And here's what happens in his mind when you make this shift, because I want you to see the machinery again. Men are loss averse, every single one of them. They will fight harder to keep something than they ever fought to get it. And that is not cynicism. That is wiring. When you speak from hope, you signal that leaving is not on the table, which means there is nothing to lose, which means there is nothing to protect.